There we go.
I think we're live.
Now we are live.
We are.
All right.
Look at that.
Tell the room.
Should we see if the people in IRC can hear us? Oh,
yeah.
You already did.
I said they're live. I'm on top of it.
You're
Maybe
superstar.
I should put the link in for them.
Is up in the description? Is it the same one?
I don't know.
Or in the topic? I mean.
Okay, this thing is really terrible.
I'll bet you tweeted it too, didn't you?
I didn't. No.
I'll tweet it.
Put that in YouTube. There we go.
All right.
Let's go out on YouTube.
Copy that link too. Just. This is our first time.
Yeah, we're amateurs at this stuff. Not really sure what's going on. Now, before we actually kick it off, this is episode 10, right?
Yeah, don't mess that up.
Yeah, you called it. It's in the topic. It's career development.
What now?
In the topic of the channel, it's career development.
Oh, I didn't know if the link was the same or if we got new links after.
All right, cool.
After every, so I'm not sure.
Well, I think people can actually listen to us now, so we should probably kick this thing off. Properly.
Yeah, we should probably get started, huh?
Yeah. All right. So episode 10, right?
Episode 10,
Cool.
10.
All right.
Save yourself some work.
Yeah. Yeah. No joke. It was actually really hard to do.
I would imagine it was.
I probably recorded myself saying episode 9 like 15 times so that it would kind of flow. It was really terrible. Anyway, all right, I'm going to kick it off. Welcome to the Loosely Coupled Podcast, episode 10. Today we're talking about junior, senior, lead, engineer, developer. What are we? We're not really sure. Well, hopefully we're sure. I don't know. We're talking about it today anyway. Maybe we'll figure it out. So how's it going, Matt?
Oh, it's going pretty well. Got a new microphone this time, so I'm going to sound super silky smooth, I think, on the recording.
Way to make it awkward.
Hey, you know. Yeah, no, things are good. Work's going well. Really, that's the only thing going on. So
work's going well. That's good.
Yeah.
It's always good when work goes well. Otherwise, you know.
Otherwise, it's more work.
Yeah. A lot more work. A lot of late nights.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think
doing a lot of JavaScript. You'd be proud.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm proud or sad for you. I think what I'm supposed to say is you should be doing Rails, right? Isn't that how
Yeah, that would be kind of your MO.
That's the persona you've given me as the Rails guy.
Oh yeah, I've made you do Rails.
No, not necessarily made me do Rails, but you've made it seem like every conversation I have is like, why aren't you Railsing? You should Rails. You should try it. It's fun.
I think that's accurate.
Okay, yeah. So maybe I do that. Whatever. No big deal. So anyway, this I don't know, the idea for this, I guess, came from just talking to other people about, well, I guess I had some questions a while back about, what is a lead developer? Like, what do you consider it, or what is it at your company or whatever, and like, what do you personally consider it? So I thought it would be a good thing to talk about and hash out, and especially since we have a live captive audience in our IRC channel, which is loosely coupled on Freenode. That's a plug right there.
It is.
Hang out in there all the time, so
Except
whatever.
for on the recording, people are going to go there, and we're not going to be talking in there.
That's true, but I'm usually in the channel, so
okay.
If they say something, then no big deal.
Okay, that's fair. I'll give you that.
Anyway, so I thought it would be a fun thing to talk about, just get some ideas out there, because I know there's a lot of people who have different opinions. So, what do you consider yourself, Matt?
That's a really good question. I'm kind of, it's funny. I'm going to kind of go back a little bit to very generally what we talked about last episode about money, and I look at it kind of the same way as what I think I'm worth, right? I'm worth whatever somebody wants to pay me. So if I go somewhere and I get hired as a senior, or a lead or whatever it is, then I usually don't think about it much more than that. Titles for me, if the salary's there and the work is there and I get to do what I want to do and actually be involved in the decision-making process and the architecture of the code and things like that. They could call me a entry-level developer, and if the money's there and I'm doing what I want to do, then I'm cool with that.
A
That's never happened.
Programmer analyst 1.
Yeah, I was gonna say ditch digger, but I think that's been played out.
Yeah, we're done with the ditch digging. I think we moved on to a different example, but
yeah, I forgot what it was.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of an important thing to talk about right out of the gate. Is, to me anyway, there's kind of two different things at play here. There's the compensation or the career ladder type of classification, and then there's the engineers or the developers classifications. Like, to me, I kind of see it in two different lights. I see there's the HR side where you're a senior and you command a certain salary or whatever.
Right.
You're a mid-level developer, or usually they have like engineer 1 and then maybe like engineer 2 and then senior engineer, then lead engineer, then staff engineer, or whatever. Like, they've got all these different
or principal
whatever.
engineer.
Yeah, principal's another popular one. So I see that side. Then I also see, like, for developers at least, I see kind of 3-ish classifications. You've got like junior, senior, and then whatever you want to call it. You can call it lead or principal or like senior lead. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But
senior lead principal.
Senior lead principal, engineer, developer, dude or gal. Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of see the two different things, and I think it's important to decide what you're going to use or what we're going to talk about, because it's obviously going to be different everywhere you go on the HR side. But I think in terms of, or in the eyes of other developers, I think there's 3, maybe 4 classifications that people look at.
Well, when you say that it's going to be different on the HR side, I think it's different on the technical side too. I think.
Wouldn't that be like by definition? If it's different.
Well,
from
it's
technical
different.
side.
It's different from HR. It's different from HR department to HR department, right?
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
And it's also, I think, very, very different from technical staff or technical department all the way down across all the companies that you have or would work for. Honestly, it's the reason I think I haven't really gotten all that concerned about what my title is, because a senior at one company may apply for a senior or a lead role at a totally different company and may have a hard time making it as a junior or as a kind of a beginning senior. I think the fact that every company does it differently makes it almost impossible to know. I think it makes it harder to hire, first of all, and it makes it impossible to know, like, what am I really?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of my point, sort of, or the point I'm trying to make anyway, is that the classification in terms of what you are by experience or are by length of time at the company or whatever the rules are for each individual department, figuring out what you're going to be or what you're going to call yourself, and then there's the I don't want to say like it's the textbook engineer or textbook developer definition, but to me, so I'll just throw this out there. To me, I've got kind of like 4 different levels that I consider individual developers. So a junior developer, like a budding developer, whatever you want to call them, is defined by characteristics like it's usually someone who thinks that the first working solution that they have is shippable or something that's like it, like that's the end of it. They don't
shut it down.
Yeah, they often don't really understand like what, or really seem to understand the impact of what they're working on right now and then what that's going to do longer term. So they don't really think about long-term impacts of their code and maintenance and stuff like that. And then they also are going to, on that level, need significant guidance on even basics of solving problems with codes. Like they they know the syntax. I'm not saying like they don't know syntax or whatever, but when you've got some weird things that go on in development, like they maybe won't understand the concept of hogging database connections, or stuff like that. They need guidance on how they solve problems that will arise in whatever problem space you're working in,
Right.
in code. So like that to me is a junior engineer. And then from that, the next level that I consider is what I call a mid-level developer, mid-level engineer, which is someone who's capable of, like, you just tell them a problem or even a task, and they're able to take that and break that down into like the pseudocode that makes up the problem, or they're able to really understand what you're saying. And that I think is the distinction where you graduate from junior to mid, is you're able to take a theoretical solution or a theoretical problem even and turn it into code. So you're at the point where you're starting to care about quality and starting to kind of understand cleaning up what you're doing prior to shipping it, that type of stuff. So these type of people will be the ones that, in my opinion, are starting to show an interest in things like architecture and testing and best practices and like understanding all of that side of development.
Right.
But they're still going to require guidance from somebody who's higher level than them to really get them on that path. So that's what I would consider mid. Then the next two are senior and lead. So senior would be a developer that's able to kind of argue for their approaches, and understand that there are more than one way to solve a problem, and really wanting to understand the pros and cons of each different solution that they've thought of before saying, here, this is ready to go. And then you can tell someone's a senior by you can kind of see or feel like the thought behind the code and understand how it's maintainable and that sort of stuff. So these are people that are polishing code, and then these are people that go into a code base and make it better, and they often have like a full understanding of the stack. So they're not just PHP programmers, but they also understand where PHP fits into, you've got all sorts of issues, like why would you decide to use NoSQL database versus relational. They understand the entire stack. That to me is a senior. And then a lead, to me, has the same qualities as a senior, but is able to, has the people skills to kind of coordinate projects and coordinate people on projects, and like not necessarily they're the manager, but they're able to enable the rest of their team to accomplish something by way of either being in the early conversations on architecture, that sort of thing, and then helping people get to where they're most effective, or that sort of thing. So to me, it's kind of
like a Scrum Master.
Sort of, if you want to phrase it that way. But
I do.
Yeah, I know. But like to me, that's kind of a blurry line. And I did a poll recently, or not that long ago, on Twitter about what lead is to people, and it's really a blurry line between technical leadership and management for a lot of people. So that to me is kind of the developer's definition. I don't know. What's your take?
So I was going to ask you. I felt like it was better to wait. So when you consider like entry-level people, like they don't know anything other than what they've learned in school, or what they've picked up. Maybe they don't. I mean, I know we have kind of one of the few industries where a computer science degree is not required to to get into the field and to be really successful. But like when you have an entry, do you loop an entry level in with junior? Because in my mind they're different things.
Yeah, I can see that. For me, I just kind of put them all in the same thing, same group. Like I would call an entry level person a junior developer. Like I wouldn't go to make the distinction. Like they still require oversight. They still require I don't want to say like hand-holding. Obviously, someone who's this is their first week of development ever is going to require significantly more attention than someone who's been doing it for a year but still hasn't quite progressed.
Right.
But to me, they're all the same tier, I guess.
Oh, okay. They're all the same.
Yeah,
Those
they're all the
people.
same to me, those juniors. No, I mean it's all about being able to think. Like to me, like as you progress as a developer, it's all about and not okay. I shouldn't say being able to think. I'm not saying
Well,
that
yeah, I
juniors
know what you
can't
mean.
think.
Like having kind of the programmer's mentality when it comes to solving problems.
Yeah, and having the experience to have seen the problems or like
Yeah.
seen things and understand how they fit into things. So
Right.
this is kind of why I take issue with places and companies promoting to senior just because you've been there for
Yeah.
5 years or whatever the length of time is. Like career ladders that are based in time, I think is a disservice to other developers because it's
Yeah.
in theory working at a place for 3 years means that you should be really good at what you're doing there. But in practice, that's not always the case. It's different for every person.
Okay, so here's a question. Actually, this just popped into my head, which these usually end well. All right, so let's say I'm going to go hypothetical here. Let's say you have uh, a junior developer or engineer, or whatever, that's showing a lot of promise. Because I've heard this before, and I'm interested for your take on it. And you kind of get to that point where you're thinking about promoting them, but for some reason you deem they're not ready. It would seem like to me that one, that's probably kind of crap. Like if you're to the point where you're like, okay, this person's like solving problems, like I don't know. It seems to me, and this is from the kind of the company standpoint, it seems to me like it's like a bargaining tool almost. Like maybe they don't get maybe their technical skills are there, but they don't get the promotion because or they don't get the promotion for 3 months because times are tough, or right. It doesn't seem to be, and I think you covered this before, but it doesn't seem to be a strictly technical thing. And I mean, I understand what you mean about like because I do the same thing. I look at developers, I look at myself, and we have kind of our little developer categorizations that aren't tied to a work. Like, oh, that person would be a lead anywhere, kind of thing. Um, but that doesn't really matter, like in the context of a job, right? Because your classification and your I won't use the word caste, but your level. Sorry. That word's been in my head all night. I wanted to use it at least once.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think you get what you're saying. So, it doesn't matter, what skill level you have in the eyes of developers. Like, to advance in a career, you have to have the promotions. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but I mean, and this is why, and like I said, this is why I don't really like this whole title thing. Like they can use that promotion aspect of it.
Yeah.
To kind of, oh, we're not going to give him a raise for 6 months, or
Yeah.
we think he's there, but we really want to make sure before we give him this promotion, or
yeah, I think part of that is
she's
just
good, but we want to make sure she's really, she's really there. She's really that
ready.
good.
Yeah, she's ready to be a junior or a mid-level or whatever. Yeah. To
Like
me,
yeah,
I think
like it's a
that's
rite of passage, like it's a sacrament or something.
yeah, yeah. Apparently, junior developers are the unclean. That's what's going on in the IRC channel. So
That's not true.
yeah, it's not
Don't
true.
listen.
But yeah, so to me, that's kind of like that's a cop out on the company side.
Yeah.
I think that's
That's what I'm saying.
to me. I think that's the responsibility of the manager of the developers to really work with them and make sure that they're achieving the skills that they need to. And it shouldn't be a question to the manager of, is this person quote unquote ready to be a mid-level? It should be something that the manager and that developer have worked towards. Like they've figured out, here's my place here's my cast, right? And I want to get to the next level. So how do I work towards that? Like I think
I think in a caste system though,
Yeah, we're not actually talking about
I
gas
don't.
systems.
Well, I just want. I don't think you move.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the point. But
Okay. Maybe that's
so
why I use it in the context of a company then.
yeah, so and that's often the case, and it's very sad. It's well, I don't want to say it's sad. It's disappointing that a lot of companies there isn't the possibility for movement, and often the only way to increase your caste or your level in this universe is to jump
Impossible.
companies.
Right.
And I think that's a mistake, but that is the reality.
Well,
So
the thing is though, with jumping companies, like let's say I'm a mid-level, and I'm kind of right on that cusp of jumping up to a senior level,
yep.
and I feel like my skills and everything have made it to that point, and I know that it's become clear that I'm not going to get the promotion where I'm at now. It's a million times easier to get a senior dev role coming from a senior dev role,
Having been a senior, yeah.
right? I mean, there's always the possibility that they're going to go like, yeah, I mean, based on, and you can't blame them in this case because they're looking at your resume going, okay, no one's ever promoted this person to senior. And
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll give you like FizzBuzz or Code Golf or something to test how
Can you
talented and
solve this
skilled you.
unsolvable problem?
Yeah,
Is buzz. Yeah.
yeah. I've seen some pretty funny FizzBuzzes actually, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, and so you may end up going into this position going, okay, well, I know that I'm there, and I feel like I'm going to have a better opportunity to get that title if I jump ship and go somewhere else. But I mean, you never know, and that's
Yeah.
the thing. It's
I mean, I'm not gonna advocate for this, but I've known people that have
lied.
no, not lied. So in the same scenario. So you're a mid-level, you're wanting to get into a senior role.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously don't have a senior role on your resume. Go take a job with not as big of a jump in salary or whatever.
So
That
like a
is
lateral move.
a senior role, so it's a lateral move in terms of salary, but
Mm-hmm.
title is a bump. And then work that for 9 months or so, and then it's easier to make the jump to another place and say, yeah, I moved to this one. They obviously saw it as a senior developer, but uh,
You don't want to
but
say it like that though. I mean,
it
to me,
wasn't it
if you
wasn't
could have,
a fit. Well, I mean, yeah, obviously you're not going to use
well,
those
I mean,
words.
they thought I was senior, so I
Yeah,
guess I am.
so I guess I am. Yeah, obviously you don't use those words, but that's kind of the mentality is you get that title, and that's one of the things I absolutely hate about this whole concept of
Yeah.
titling is because
It's
it seems like
ranking. I mean, it's like the hot or not of engineers.
yeah, it's a race to get a title and then hold on to it. It's like look, I finally achieved this status, so I can walk around and I can be a senior uh, a senior level employee anywhere now. So just because I've done it once.
Right, right. Well, yeah, once you obtain it, it's like you have to. I mean, short of maybe going to, if you're a senior at, XYZ company and I'm going to pick on some place in America, like downtown Omaha.
Why would you go there?
Well, because I don't know if I know anyone that's in Omaha. Maybe I do, and if
Are
I
there
do,
any
I'm
people
not trying to offend Omaha. I'm just saying, if you're a senior level at some mom and pop shop in any town USA, and then you take that and you try to go to Facebook or Google or
Yeah.
something like that, and you say, "Oh, I was a senior at uh, Dave's Development Den in Omaha, Nebraska."
Well, yeah, and I think that's the same thing as being the CEO of your sole proprietorship, right?
I was the CEO of
I've seen
Frost
people
Incorporated.
I've seen people who started their own companies and then label themselves CEO, and just despite the fact that that's obviously not really correct, but I think your point is valid, and I think this is part of what is being mentioned in the chat room or in the channel. It's you know if you were to go to from mom and pop in Omaha, Nebraska, what did you call it?
Dave's Development Den.
Dave's Development Den. So if you go
DDD,
from
if you will.
DDD, not the good kind of DDD,
Not, yeah. Well, Sorry, Dave. That's probably a real place.
Yeah. So if you go from
No
the
disrespect,
den
Dave.
to Google,
Yeah.
in your example,
Yeah.
Google obviously has the skills and resources to actually figure out what level of developer you are. So
Sort of. See,
you may
I don't know if I agree with that.
you don't think that technical companies and technical
I
people have
think they have the skills and resources to do it, but I don't know that they. I mean, I've never been at it. I've interviewed with places big and small, and I mean, I've never. I don't think I've ever come away from an interview being like, yeah, that's a really good representation of like my skills. Like they really know everything they need to know about me. I think. I mean, and I'm probably nitpicking here about interviewing being. I mean, I've done some terrible interviews. I've been interviewed terribly. I've had good interviews. I've had great interviews. I mean, I just. I mean, unless you're going to require, and this is a whole different topic that we're not going to get into because it's our podcast and we don't have to. If you start requiring like large or more strongly considering large open source contributions and an active community presence and things like
Oh,
that.
you went there, huh?
I went there. I think you get a better representation of kind of what a person does and what they're capable of doing. But I think there's been some hesitancy for companies to be like, yeah, we're not going to really consider you unless you have a large swath of open source contributions.
Interestingly, I actually saw a blog post about this today. It was from
Ooh.
a guy who's talking about job postings.
Timely, almost like we discussed that beforehand.
Yeah, but we didn't.
But we didn't.
Ooh, sneaky. Anyway, I saw a blog post where a guy was talking about job postings, and he was like, it seems rather silly to him that companies have in their posting, like in their requirements,
Mm-hmm.
must have a good or a decent GitHub profile. Like they're submit your GitHub profile for our review to figure out if you're a good developer or not. And then he was like, well, if I then go to that company's GitHub profile and see nothing, what does that say? Like they're requiring me to work and give back to open source, but the company itself isn't embracing their own requirements for developers.
Yeah.
So like to me, I think it's kind of a one-sided thing. So I don't know. I personally don't like if you do have a GitHub profile and if you came to an interview with my company or whatever, and I'm in charge. No, I'm not inviting people. I'm saying if you did do that.
Okay. Hypothetically.
And you had a really great GitHub profile. That's great. I'll use that, and I'll certainly ask you about it.
So let me stop you there. What is that?
What is what?
What is a really great GitHub profile?
Well, I mean, you have something you're active in projects.
Updated profile picture?
Yeah, your profile picture is on point. It's sharp and crisp.
I think that's important to discuss. Like what? Not the profile.
Can I answer the question? Is that okay?
Yeah, but you got to a point that I wanted to. Okay, go ahead.
No, okay, yeah. So to me, like a GitHub, like a good GitHub profile, right? Like if I were evaluating a candidate based on a GitHub profile, I would look for activity. I would look for what they're doing. So I would look for a decent mix of contributing to a project which may or may not be their own, and then also discussions and helping in projects that they're working on. So if you're contributing to 2 projects, let's say, I would want to see like a healthy mix of you writing code and then also you looking at pull requests or commenting on pull requests or whatever. And obviously it depends on sizes of projects and who's working on them, whatever. So if it's just your thing, like if you're the only developer, that's totally different. But if you were working in a project with a bunch of people, I'd want to see that you actually have the communication skills that are required for our company or whatever. Like that's what I would be looking at is how you do it. I don't really care that you're contributing to the core of PHP or contributing to a WordPress plugin. It doesn't really matter. Like to me, what
Okay.
you're doing, it's how you're doing it is more important. So I would just kind of use it as a tool there, but it wouldn't be the end all be all of, I wouldn't reject someone just because I didn't like their GitHub profile,
Okay.
because I think that's silly.
Okay, that's fair. That's pretty much how I would define it too.
Are you sure you don't have anything controversial to say?
Come on, dude. I never say controversial things.
Yeah. So to me, I think it's kind of that will come out over time, right? Like I think
Okay, yeah.
That's the thing.
We agree. We agree completely.
Cool. Good thing we're co-hosts on a podcast. We
I
actually
know,
need someone to
right?
disagree with us now.
I know.
I'm sure Chris can
Is
handle
anyone
it
complaining in
IRC. Oscar's talking
they're
about
talking about a bunch of stuff.
yeah. Anyway,
They're
so
talking us.
okay, so I've got a question for you, which is kind of loaded, given the conversation we already had. But what does the word senior mean to you?
Old. No, I'm just kidding.
So it's time based.
No, I just meant I was thinking like Golden Girls. No, a senior in terms of an engineer, what does a senior mean to me? Honestly, I think time in a lot of cases is an aspect of it, but it's more than just time. I think it's sorry, I just saw a comment. I think it's how that time was used, right? So, you know, there are cases where somebody maybe has been writing code for 2 years and they're just kind of a dynamo, and they get to that point, like kind of how you described, where they can make arguments for their design decisions and suggest design decisions, and they've seen enough things that have worked and not worked to be able to kind of like investigate things, go down one road and investigate something, and on the other hand, know from experience, from having done it and seen it fail miserably a million times,
Yeah.
that something's not going to work, and not wasting time investigating something that they know is not going to work.
All right. Yeah, I think that's fair. Like,
So, I mean, I do think the time component is there.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the most important thing, and I don't think it's like, oh, you've been here 5 years, you must be pretty good by this point. Because there's people,
see a senior.
Yeah, there's people that are 9 to 5ers, and that's fine. They come to work, and they do their job, and they do it reasonably well. Then they go home, and then they
That's it.
throw a frisbee to their dog or something.
They come back the next day and do it all
And
over.
then they come right, and it's just that, and that's fine. I mean, I think you need, you need those people. Every organization has those people and needs those people. They're kind of reliable. They're not rocking the boat too much. They're coming in, they're doing their job, and they're going home. I think
mid-level engineers.
Yeah. A senior, I expect to rock the boat a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So the time thing, I think, is to me is experience. So like it's not. I don't think there's a quantity of time. Like
Right.
you can work someplace for a year and experience one exact problem, right? Like only exactly one problem, right? Like you can go through and just know exactly what you're doing. But someone else could work for a year at a different place and see all kinds of stuff, like large data problems or anything. So I think experience is different. So to me, like the time is more on the side of experience. And then to me, like the word senior kind of implies a maturity in development. So it's someone that's you can give them information about problems that are external, not necessarily only technical tasks that they're given. So it's we've got this coming up. We need to figure out how to do it, and they're able to work independently and figure it out. Like it's like that thought concept. So to me, a senior is someone who's able to identify and then prioritize tasks for themselves in a larger system or a larger problem scope.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the distinguishing marker for me in terms of regular engineer versus senior engineer.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I look at it too. Like when I do a resume, for example, I'm going to put all my work experience on there, so they're going to know how long, I've been programming professionally. Right? They're going to know, oh, he's been there for 8 years, or been in the game for 8 years. But I always try to highlight my, not even just open source, but community involvement, because I think, if I come home and I do 4 hours of coding every night after I get home from work,
yeah,
I'm picking up, a year and a half's worth of experience in a year.
and hopefully it's diverse experience. So go back to our episode where we talked about side projects and what to pick, and hopefully it's not just here's what I do at my day job, come home for 4 hours, do the exact same thing.
Right, like if you're building, you're working on a CMS at work, and then you come home and you contribute to WordPress or Pyro or something like that. Yeah.
Or you did dig ditches at work, and you come home and dig some ditches in your yard. I mean, it's
nobody would do that. I don't know if you've ever dug one before, but it's hard.
There's a certain skill to it. Are you a senior?
There's a certain amount of elbow grease that you need to, you got to get your rest.
Yeah. I don't even know.
Yeah, I think I just kind of killed it there, didn't I?
Yeah. So I brought up Stack Overflow driven development, which is my favorite kind of extreme junior development pattern.
Okay.
This is where you have a problem, and so you go to Stack Overflow and copy it and paste it and say, I'm done. So we're talking about...
Because the code there is always immaculate.
Yeah, well, it's usually catered exactly to the problem that you have.
Right.
Almost, yeah, precisely. So I think this is another area where it helps it helps me to distinguish between different levels of developers, is asking them questions about how they figure out solutions to things that they, how they figure out solutions to problems that they are having. And like sometimes if I were interviewing somebody, I might ask them questions along the lines of, you run into a problem with, I don't know, like let's use the one I've been working on recently. So you run into problems with cores, which is always fun.
As in cross-site?
Yeah, cross-origin, resource security, or whatever it is.
That's funny, because I've actually been dealing with that too.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So suppose you do that, and you run across, or you go and you Google and figure out that, or I may even ask them, like, what terms would you Google, right? Like just to kind of see their thought process and how they get to something, and then I may go and give them some feeder information about, like, okay, you run into Stack Overflow posts which tell you these things. Like, how do you decide what path to take? And like, I don't really care that they pick, the right end solution or whatever, or if there even is one, but I care more about thought process. So this is kind of where I can distinguish, or personally I can figure out if someone is what I classify as more junior mid-level to mid-senior level, is if they can explain to me and articulate how they go about evaluating other code that they see, so either Stack Overflow or within their own repository or whatever, just how they go about breaking it down and understanding it, I think is a great thing. So more senior level is able to articulate, well, I would do this, or I look for these certain indicators, whatever. Like they'd be able to articulate a path from very little information that you're giving them to how they would come up with a solution, whereas a mid-level will say, well, I would just copy and paste it and see what happens.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's the one thing, because I've been asked that question a lot. I think I mentioned in a previous podcast that I went through a period about 2 years ago where I interviewed like close to 30 times in the span of like a year and a half. And I was asked that question a lot, and it's interesting to hear you say that because I always wondered kind of what the right answer for that was. Because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm a very firm believer in inter-team communication, right? And not to say that every time you have a problem, you should go to your lead or your senior or whatever and ask.
Yeah.
But I think there are times where you can find yourself Googling for something that the person sitting next to you uh, could help you solve in a much shorter amount of time.
Yeah.
So I've always wondered when that question comes up, because I look at Google and I look at Stack and all those other kind of resource, PHP classes. Um,
Why would you do that?
sorry, I had to go there. I look at those as kind of like last resort type things.
Yeah,
I mean,
I can see that.
like I have a problem. I've thought about it. I've tried a couple things to that point, because I think if you just go, okay, well, I don't know how to do that. Um, like maybe you do, or maybe the answer would come to you if you tried a couple of things. So the way I always kind of progress through that question is, you know, I'm going to try to solve the problem myself in a time efficient manner. I'm not saying spend a week on it and then be like, yeah, I don't know, but you know, try a couple things, see if something comes of that. If I get to a point after two hours or so, whatever a reasonable amount of time is for the task that you have, and it doesn't, the solution doesn't kind of become obvious to me, my next step is usually to go to um, somebody that's more familiar with the code base. And I've been in a situation where I've been new for the last year and a half. Like, I just haven't been at my last two jobs very long. And so I'll try to find somebody with more experience in the code base and say, hey, this is the problem I have. A, have you seen this before? And if so, what kind of, how's this problem been solved in the past? Um, and then if they're like, yeah, I've never seen that before, you're kind of on your own, then that's usually when I go, okay, well, I'm gonna go to the interwebs and see if somebody else has come across something similar to this, knowing that it won't be the exact problem or the exact solution to the exact problem that I have, but something that is going to help me kind of get over that mental hurdle and then kind of go from there. So I mean, I look at Google and Stack and all those other things as resources, and I look at my teammates and um, kind of the other problems that they've solved throughout time as resources as well. And I think as long as you make an effective use of the resources, I don't know that there's a wrong answer.
Yeah, so I guess from your perspective then your teammates are like in the flesh Google.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be like. Have you seen that video? If Google was a guy,
Oh yeah, I think I have.
yeah, yes, they're basically like that.
Yeah. No,
Um,
I get what you're saying, and I think that's valid, and part of that is I think it was actually Liz Smith who told me this a long time ago, but about dealing with or interacting with apprentices and or she calls them minions. She's like, most of it is not about teaching them things; it's about teaching them how to learn things
right,
and how to figure out the answers to their questions. So I think your teammates, obviously, if you're in a position where you don't know something, and there's someone who's more, will dare to say, senior than you, either in experience in the code base or just in the technology you're using or whatever. Obviously, that is a very good place to go. Like that is a good
right,
first step is ask them because they are there. And then through time, so say you are a junior engineer at a place, and you go and ask a senior engineer a question, and then they say, well, I'm not really sure. Let me look around. And you're with them, and you figure out the answer. Like maybe they look for something in the code base or whatever. Over time, you learn the same skills. Like you learn how to go about figuring out your own answers, and that's how you progress. So it's the mentor relationship inside of your company. So if you have that, if you have the ability or coworkers to do that, that's great. That's definitely a first place I would start too.
Right. Yeah, I think 2 points that I want to make kind of on the tails of that is one, you should always be respectful of other people's time.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of just blasting questions at people in a chat room, or walking up to someone's desk in the middle of the day and be like, hey, I have this problem. It's always obviously good to be respectful of other people's time and to understand that, yes, they're there to help you and you're all there to kind of work together, but they have things that they're doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you could very well be distracting them.
Yep. Which is always a big concern as well.
Right. And then the second thing is kind of what you just said. If I was a senior and I had a junior come to me with a question like that, like, hey, I got a problem, I'm not really sure what to do about it, my expectation of them would be that they would stay there with me while we research the problem together, and the expectation wouldn't be, all right, yeah, just shoot me an email when you find something that works. Well, I mean, and I say that, and yes, it's funny.
That would be awesome.
It's funny, but I've seen it happen. I'm like, yeah, just shoot me an email when you find something, and I'll take it from there.
Yeah, I'll get right on that. Yeah, and I think that's part of the skill that you have to learn as a senior at a place, or at any job, whatever, in any project, is the ability to work with, and this is part of mentoring skills in general, is someone asks you a question, you need to work them up to a certain point. Like if they need guidance to get started, you have to learn how to figure out how to do that and then let them take over.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important skill to learn as a senior developer.
Yes, yeah. The nice thing about kind of progressing through the ranks, and you alluded to this earlier, is as you get better and more senior-ish, you pick up skills that are important for the organization that aren't necessarily tied to code or solving problems with code. You kind of fall more into a mentor role, and you fall more into a teacher leader type role.
Well, hopefully you are, and if you aren't, I would urge you to find a new company or work with your manager and figure out how you can do that, because for me personally, that's how I've grown at every step of the way. It was just being in a position where I wasn't just asking questions, but also helping guide other people. So,
right.
Even really early on in companies, it was, I tried to force myself to contribute as much as I took, give as much as I take.
Right.
That's kind of my philosophy. So,
but yeah, I think it's I think by doing that and by picking up those skills and by actively seeking those skills, I think what you said was a good point. If you're just there, and I think you see this a lot more in places where you're promoted based on longevity.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the primary factor. And you haven't deleted or you haven't run an update without a where clause on production and blown up all of your data. And like, yeah, okay, he hasn't killed us yet, so we'll give him a promotion.
Solid developer, A+.
Yeah, A+. Yeah, she puts where clauses on all of her queries. Uh,
Which is a good skill to have, by the way, if you're
yeah,
listening.
you should do that. Yeah. But I think you see that more. I think you see where, okay, well now um, Johnny or Debbie or whoever is the senior now because they've been here 5 years,
Yeah.
and the expectation now is that they. I've actually seen it where the expectation becomes, oh, okay, well that's really hard. We're going to give that to Debbie or we're going to give that to Johnny, and there's not really that exchange of ideas. It's just kind of like, hey, Debbie, we have this problem. Um, you're a senior, so figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's just more kind of like same old stuff.
Yeah. Knowledge transfer is also another fun dynamic inside, especially growing companies or growing teams. Anyway, I should say is yeah. You end up in those situations where so and so's been here the longest, so he or she knows the ins and outs of how things were done. So it's, if you've got a project that is really, really important or really, really hard, then
Mm-hmm.
we should give it to that person because they have the most experience with it and they've done all these projects in the past. But you're really not helping your team from that standpoint. Like
Right.
even if you have a team of all mid-level developers, like let's just say that for some reason that's how you ended up hiring is all mid-level developers. I'm not going to say all junior developers because that would be scary, but let's say all mid-level developers somehow
The
you
inmates
ended
are
up,
running the asylum.
yeah. Then uh, then you're not doing anybody any favors by going to the most tenured mid-level developer every time. Like you're not allowing the others, or you're not really allowing anyone to advance because in that scenario, if you've got somebody who's been there for long enough to be considered the most tenured mid-level developer, that
Yeah.
probably means that they are not really growing because they've had all the pressure and everything put on them for so long.
Right.
So, and I'm talking in certain situations, but
Yes.
um,
Of course.
so they're probably not growing. So then you now have that person who you're treating as your senior or lead, who's not really advancing or not really picking up the people skills that are necessary for that. So now you've got all these other people who should be learning from this person, but they're not. So to me, I think it's a big fallacy or a huge mistake to put something on someone just because they've been the longest tenured.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's important to give the other people the opportunity to fail miserably at something because they don't understand the existing system, but
Right.
by doing so, they grow the entire knowledge base of everybody on the team, and
Right.
everyone better.
So yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think I consider myself uh, seniorish. I keep using that like it's an actual word. It's not really a word. Um, right. I mean, I consider myself to be senior lead in that area. Um, and I still like when you switch jobs or when you start something new, where there's a new project or um, something that you don't have hands-on experience with. It's really easy to kind of go into that and feel like I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Anytime you start a new job, I mean, most places aren't going to show you their source code before they hire you,
What?
which I can think of a couple situations where if that had happened, my career path might look a little bit different. Um, right. I mean, and it makes sense why the companies don't do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not complaining about that, but you can. It's really hard. I think for like an active, and I say active, I mean kind of outside of their 9 to 5, a community-driven person that wants to learn and is actively, using their free time to get better and doing open source or reading, leather-bound books about programming. Um, I think it's really kind of it makes your brain kind of go haywire when you go into a place and they have like a legacy application,
Yeah.
and you're like you have this wonderful information in your brain about like what nice clean code should look like and what maintainable code should look like. And then you start a new job and you're like, oh my god,
Yeah.
like I don't even know, like I've never even seen anything like this before. And I think like when you're, just to kind of differentiate a little more, I guess, like when you're a senior, I mean, you're still going to have that Ermagerd reaction, or you should. You should if you see a big mess. Um, but a senior, I think, is more quickly going to be able to kind of wrap their head around what's going on and um, kind of not only wrap their head around what's going on and be able to be productive in it, but having that balance of getting work done and um, making the code base look less like a hellish nightmare.
Yeah, which I think this is also kind of segues good into if you're talking to a to another developer and you're talking about situations, you can kind of tell a developer's experience and skill level based on questions that they ask you.
That's a very good point.
Well, I mean, it kind of plays into interviewing, right, as well. So,
yes.
when you're in an interview and the interviewer asks you something like, "Well, do you have any questions for me?" You can kind of tell based on what questions someone asks, where they are in their career.
Yeah.
Not always. I mean, obviously, some people interview better than others, but you can usually tell by what they want to know.
Okay.
How advanced they, or what level they're in their career. Like it's it. I mean, I don't want to go into extreme specifics. That would take too much time. But if you're asking questions about what have you guys thought about the new hot technology or whatever, chances are they're probably not necessarily that senior, depending
Have you
on
guys
how.
heard of jQuery?
Yeah, like well, it doesn't have to be that basic, but like you can tell someone who is able to understand abstract concept of even your company's or your current technical progress,
Right.
just through an interview and asking you good questions. You can tell their I don't want to say competence level, but their class or their caste level. Yeah.
Oh man, that's gonna get out of control.
Yeah, it probably is.
Okay, so no, I agree with that. I think yeah, like if you're interviewing someone for a senior and they ask you like, did you say fizz buzz or fizz baz? You're like, okay.
Well, if they ask that, you just tell them to get out.
Well, if you ask them to do fizz buzz, you should probably get out too.
Yeah.
But no, so how do we kind of take, right? We've defined these roles out. I think pretty well, and obviously with the understanding that every company and every person is going to have kind of slightly different criteria or whatever for determining these roles. But
Yeah, everybody is a special snowflake, correct?
Yes. So I guess where I kind of wanted to go with some of this is kind of getting out of definition mode, if you will, and into kind of some. I don't know if practical application is the right word, but maybe like practical advice. And we've covered a little bit, but maybe kind of from each step. Like, okay, you can kind of relatively accurately identify where you are in the ladder,
Yeah.
which rung you are on, if you will. And I'm avoiding the word now. Right, and obviously your goal is to make lots of money and have a mansion and a Ferrari and stuff. And you only do that by by becoming a lead. No, by advancing in your career.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you have any practical? So let's just start. Right, you're a junior dev, right, and you're kind of just like smack dab in the middle of that rung.
I am. How'd you know?
I know. I could tell by the questions you were asking me before we started. I'm just kidding. You're at least mid-level.
Thanks, dude.
Anyway, so you're kind of smack dab in the middle of junior, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
right? And because I'm sure there's people listening that are all over the place, right? Everywhere from junior to lead.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, we're catering to a vast audience, a diverse audience. What kinds of practical advice would you have for somebody in that spot that really wanted to kind of make that next leap?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna. This is like kind of the basic advice that I give anyone who wants to advance their career is find somebody who is at or above the level you want to get to, and figure out and talk with them about how you can get there. So hopefully that person is your manager or your team leader or something to that effect in that particular situation. But if it's not, find somebody outside of where you are who can help you figure out what you need to progress to the next skill level. Because I mean, honestly, there's nothing that can help you better than someone who has been there before or has the grasp of technical skills to help you chart a path. Like, so this kind of goes back to our last episode. We were talking about career development of, really understanding where you are and how to get to the next place is fundamentally, or kind of requires a ongoing dialogue, right? Like, it's not something that you're going to start tomorrow and be like, all right, you know what? I've woken up. I'm a junior developer. I want to be a mid-level developer because I heard this podcast on Loosely Coupled and they were talking about it, so I'm ready to go to the next level.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I that sounds like fun. Let me do that. It's not
I
something.
want money and Ferraris.
Yeah, I don't think it's something that you can just wake up one day and want. Like, I think it's something that you'll realize yourself getting better or even stagnating at how you're being treated, or not treated, but how you're being interacted with. You'll find yourself kind of doing the same things in the same ways, and so that will be an opportunity, if you're not already having that dialogue, to really talk about, here I am. I feel like I've kind of exhausted the breadth of what I need to do, or the depth of what I need to do here at this particular position. So what can I do to bring myself to the next level, and have that conversation with a technical person and then with a managerial person. Like, I think those are two key components to figuring this particular formula out.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny because you kind of corrected yourself when you said how they treat you.
Yeah.
And I think, I think there's some validity to that, right? Yeah. In terms of, I guess when you say it, it kind of sounds like, yeah, they're still, whipping me with an extension cord. I guess I'm still a junior.
Well, yeah, that's why I corrected it to how you're interacted with.
Right.
Because when you're interacting with a junior developer, it's more often to be something like, hey, we have this particular problem. What you should do is these things.
Yeah.
And then kind of give them some initial guidance. And then after that, once they get to the next level, it's more like, hey, we've got this problem. What do you think we should do?
Okay, so it's like kind of that, yeah.
It's the interaction. It's not really treating. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I get out of my cage 2 hours a day.
Yeah. I saw sunlight today. It was awesome.
Well, I don't know. Around here, you can work in an office and be a senior and not see the sunlight.
Oh, you're still in the cube farm, huh? No. Yeah, that's another way to tell what you are in your system is Whether you're in the middle of a cube farm or towards the outers or in an office, right? That's
Or at home with no pants on.
or at home with no pants on, which is the ideal place to be. That's my
And,
advice. If you want to
yeah.
be, yeah,
Okay.
no. All right.
Do you think, and I wanted to ask, right, because we talked about progressing in your career, and we talk about having conversations with developers that are kind of where you want to be, and they don't always have to be one level up. I mean, granted, if you're a junior and you're talking to Igor, you're probably just gonna your eyes are just gonna glaze over at some point. You're not gonna understand
Yeah.
a word he's saying, or it's not really gonna help you all that much, except to realize that Igor is really smart. I found, and this is hard to do, and it's obviously dependent on whether or not you have the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But outside the office, having the ability and the time to write crappy code, because when you're a junior, most of the code that you write is crappy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's I'm not trying to offend anyone. You just the experience isn't there, and you're solving problems kind of, hey, it works, so it works. But writing code that other people can see and critique, I've seen some people that have done this like way more fearlessly than I ever did. They're just like, hey, I wrote this function and this is what it does, and you're like, and then but they get the input of a lot of different people. Whether it be a gist or an actual project on GitHub or Bitbucket. I don't think anyone uses Bitbucket.
I think Chris does actually.
Oh, sorry, Chris. Yeah, or Bitbucket, totally valid second option. And getting feedback that way, and actually, right? Because I mean, yeah, you're going to get a lot of the kind of soft skills and more specific. For this code base, this is kind of what you need to know in order to get to that next level and to understand the decisions that have been made and suggest your own solutions and things like that. But in terms of just kind of becoming a better all-around programmer,
yeah,
the ability to kind of share code or even just share ideas, even if you're a junior and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to show anybody that. Like you're probably still using the MySQL extension.
So basically you're saying like if you're extremely embarrassed by the code that you've written all the time, that you are a junior. Is that what you're saying?
You're either a junior or a lead.
Or a lead. You're probably a lead. No, you're the management side of lead that doesn't get into the code too much anymore.
Right.
No, I think that's somewhat valid. I think part of it would also depend on if you had a real understanding of why you're embarrassed by your code, right?
Right.
Like I think to me a junior is more likely to say, hey, I wrote this function that works, so it's good, right? What do you people think about this new library that I wrote? And they'll put it on PHP classes or Bitbucket.
No, that's probably not fair. I didn't mean to be unnecessarily harsh to Bitbucket. I think Bitbucket is in a different caste than PHP classes.
I know, but I'm keeping this alive because they're talking about in the
they're talking about
channel
PHP
right
classes?
Now. No, they're talking about Bitbucket and why you hate it. But
Chris is yelling at me.
Yeah, I think a junior is more likely to think that, hey, I got this code and it works, therefore it's good. Like I think that's kind of the defining thing is, the higher up you are and getting that feedback from outside is more of a approach that I would really see a junior doing or taking that approach of, going into, let's say, PHP community or PHP mentoring or something and saying, hey, I wrote this library. What do you all think about this? And be disappointed with the response because it's less than desirable or whatever. And then a senior would be more along the lines of, hey, I wrote this. It has these problems. Can anyone help me figure out why? Or not necessarily a senior, but higher up the ladder, they would be able to pinpoint problems with what they're what they've written, and then ask for specific help. So I think that's kind of the distinguishing thing. But yes, I think getting outside review or getting other people's eyes onto what you're working on is always a good idea if you have the ability to do that without compromising the intellectual property of your company or whatever. Do that as much as you can because
Yeah.
that's the way to do it.
Well, and if your goal, I mean, that's what it comes down to. If your goal is really to advance, and to advance quickly and to gain experience quickly, it's kind of, not kind of, it is all kind of based around the amount of work that you put in order to get to that place. Because if you're expecting it to just happen, like, especially if you're at a good company and they're going to be like, yeah, you're just not, you've been here 5 years, but you're just not a mid-level. And in that case, they'd probably consider getting rid of you because you're not growing. But you're going to get that advancement and the experience and stuff that you need by putting in the hard work that you need to do in order to get that experience.
Yeah, I can see that. It's fair. All right, I'm actually gonna. I asked for some questions out of the channel because
they're ragging on me in there, aren't they?
Yeah, well, they're no. I mean, there's a good summary which I'll go over later, but
I'm sure you will.
So the first question is, suppose you're at a position or whatever, and everything's going great, going well. You kind of progressed on in the organization, and you're considered like the subject matter expert, or the person that everyone goes to. You're the mentor or whatever.
Me.
So people come to you all the time for advice,
Yes.
but and that's great. Like that's a good position to be in. But you feel like your personal your trajectory in terms of learning has reached its peak, reached its summit, right? Like you've learned all you can learn from that job. So
Yes.
you're happy with what you're doing, and you're happy that you're, that mentor, that senior guy that everyone talks to. But how do you know if and when you should move? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question. In my experience, that tends to happen a lot to subject matter experts as you kind of get to a point where you're like, I know all this stuff, and in some cases I kind of wish I didn't. I mean, it's really hard to tell people when to leave a job and when to stick it out,
Yeah.
And stick it out's the wrong word. I mean, if you enjoy what you're doing and you're being fulfilled from it, you always have to consider, I think, that leaving something that you're happy with for another opportunity, while a lot of times that could be positive, that could be a good move for your career, it could also be terrible.
Yep.
It could be a huge step backwards. It could be not what you're expecting it to be. And in that case, then you've exchanged something that you're reasonably happy doing for something that you hate. And so my advice is always, when you feel unfulfilled, right? And I understand people have career goals and things like that, and you have to consider that as well. But yeah, I mean, I generally don't consider moving until I feel like A, I've stagnated, B, I don't enjoy what I'm doing, and yeah, that's usually it. I thought there was a C, but there's not. If I'm not growing and I hate it, then generally for me it's time to move on. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a subject matter expert on, and typically those tend to be with either homegrown systems, right? You've been there a long time and you kind of have helped create this unfathomable beast, or you're working with some sort of third-party software that you've just worked with enough to know kind of the quirks and the ins and outs of.
Yeah, I suppose you're writing beans for a certain.
Right. I knew you were going to go there.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Then if you're happy doing that, then by all means, try to get everything that you can get out of that position as long as you're happy. But I wouldn't sacrifice sanity or personal happiness just because I happen to be a subject matter expert in something.
So the channel has actually given you a point C in your list there.
I see that. Yeah, so point C would be I've established a functional caste system.
Yeah, apparently that's your thing today.
That's so
caste
yeah.
system,
If I've
so.
established a functional caste system and I'm unhappy
Yeah, it's
and
time to move on.
not growing, then it's definitely time.
Yeah, I think for me this
my work here is done.
For me this question I think is all about your own goal. So as being a subject matter expert, that kind of implies that you're at the senior to senior lead-ish area. Being the person that everyone's going to, it kind of depends on your goals. Like if you feel like you're not being challenged technically, and you feel like that you could be challenged somewhere else technically, and your current roadmap for your career tells you that, or you've established that the next thing you want to do is grow technically or move into a different area of competency, then that would be the point where you say, okay, I either have to figure out how I can achieve that here, or I need to go somewhere else that can help me get there. So to me, it's all about evaluating your own roadmap. Like that's why I kind of harp on this idea of constantly looking at and maintaining a kind of career path or a career roadmap that tells you, where am I now, and as hokey as it may sound, like having, you could even do like a journal or something to that effect. That's you've got some way to, dare I say, retrospect on where you are and where you've come, and like how you haven't got to where you want to be over a certain amount of time or whatever. So to me, that would be how I figure out. And this is a problem for me personally, and I think a lot of other developers, is, I feel like I focus a lot on like tech learning. So I focus a lot on, how well have I mastered all the skills of programming and of designing and architecting.
And Rails.
And Rails. Like how have I mastered all of that, and then what's my next step technically? But there's also other things like, how can I become a better mentor? How can I become a better leader? So your learning trajectory isn't always tied exclusively to tech.
Right.
I think that's something that you need to reconcile with your own career path, is figure out, what is the next step for you, whether technically or on a we'll call it people skills or professional level. Right. I think that's
professional skills or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, like personal development and professional development go hand in hand. So I think that's what I would focus on. And then if I came to the conclusion that really the next level for me, or the next thing I want to do, is different technical challenges, then I would probably end up moving, because as fun as it is to think that you can say, hey, I want to learn about big data, so I'm going to force my company into big data problems. You can't force your company into big data problems. Like, you either have them or you don't.
Right.
So, like, if that's what you're interested in, that's what you want to learn, then you're going to have to go somewhere that has that problem, right?
Rest assured, though, people will try.
Well, yes, and that's where you get knocked down the caste system back into the mid-level, is when you make those types of decisions to force really huge engineering solutions to really small problems.
Right.
Yeah. So that's my take on it.
Okay.
Then,
the point I really wanted to make is I agree with that, and I think, for every person it's different. The point I did want to make is that, you can make a move, and it can be worse and terrible.
Or it can be good.
It can be good. And hopefully, you've done enough research and enough investigation into prospective employers that you're putting yourself in a situation where that risk is significantly lower. But there are situations where you can just be like, until you're at the level where you can literally do anything, just be aware that you can get yourself in a situation where you're not, happy. Yeah.
Definitely good advice. Okay, so another question that came up in the chat from a C level, I think, Oscar the C level.
What? C level, like
CEO, COO, CTO, C level.
Oh, I was thinking like
not
the
sea level
ocean.
like the level of the ocean. I don't even know
he's
what
at
that
sea
would
level.
mean.
Okay,
He's
cool.
at sea level right now.
He's
Yeah.
on the beach.
Anyway, his question is, what is our opinion, or I guess what is a good mix, percent wise, or assuming a small or realistic or reasonably sized team of senior to junior developers? You want to go first, or you want me to go first? I'll go first.
You go first.
Yeah, so for me, I kind of follow the, or I think the ideal hiring pattern, we'll start there, is to start with 1 to 2 senior levels per team that you have. So whether you break up by discipline or product teams or whatever, 1 to 2 seniors per team, and then the ideal ratio of seniors to juniors would be something like 1 to 4, maybe 1 to 5, depending on what you have structurally above that. So if you've got like a lead and then 2 seniors, 5 juniors is, I think, a good number to look at as a max for team size. And I say that because juniors have the quickest path to leveling up in the caste system.
We gotta stop using that term. I feel bad about it because I don't know enough about the caste system to know if that's like super offensive.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. We'll stop calling it the caste system. But juniors have the most, or the path of least resistance to leveling up.
Okay.
So 5 is a decent number to quote unquote manage as a senior engineer, and I don't mean manage personally, like deal with their HR paperwork, but manage in terms of interacting with them and making sure that the work is distributed and helping them advance and helping you advance while keeping your own sanity or whatever. So I think 5 is kind of the maximum that each senior, with support of someone else, either another senior or a lead, can kind of handle and keep focused and efficient.
Okay.
So that is the ideal.
So you said 5 juniors?
Yeah, 5 juniors to 1 senior-ish, like somewhere around that number.
Percentage-wise, we're looking about 18%.
Yes, seniors, yes.
Okay.
That to me is the ideal mix. So like hiring strategy-wise, I think you should always start with seniors, and the reason for that is it's much easier to take better code and add less experienced people to it to be productive than it is to take a mess that less experienced people made and make it better.
Yes.
So in my experience, it's better to start, if you can, with larger or with people higher up on the ladder.
Okay.
So that's.
I think the biggest thing with that is, right, obviously, and I think it's an economics thing too. The more senior level or lead or even mid-level developers that you have, you're hopefully going to be paying them more than you are the juniors.
Yeah, they cost more. Yeah.
Right. If you're doing it right, you're going to be paying them more.
It's a long-term investment, though.
It is, right. And it's not that it's a bad investment, but some places don't have the capital or the revenue to to have 3 seniors on a team.
That's true. So here's my point on that, right? So a common thing in startups that you end up with the pattern of getting the prototype out, and then banging away on it for a while, hacking as much features into it. And this is like natural growth of startups. Like you have to do this. Like you don't have to, but a lot of times you end up having to. So you have to hack things away, and then you end up 2-3 years into it, and you've quote unquote made it as a startup. So you're ready for your next level of, funding or whatever you're doing, right?
Yes.
Then you're hiring more senior level engineers because you need them now.
Yep.
And what do you run into? You run into scalability problems. You run into issues with the code base that are just something that's impossible to decipher, and so you end up rewriting. So now it's actually cost you probably quadruple what it would have cost you to hire the senior levels at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because now not only are you spending money for the senior engineers that you didn't want to pay for up front, but now you're paying them to rewrite existing stuff.
Yes.
So you're now paying them to make zero progress towards the future of your company,
Right.
or very, very limited progress. So to me, it's a matter of figuring out long-term versus short-term investments and gains. Now, it's going to be different for every company in every situation. So I'm not saying like this is a right and wrong situation, but the ideal world would be you're able to figure out a way to hire and pay the senior level engineers first.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay. That's fair. I would imagine that's why a large number of startups don't work out.
Possibly, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, but I mean,
outside the scope of the
yeah.
topic, but yeah, it makes sense, right? If you're if you're having to spend time that you could be moving forward, fixing things that are already done, you're going through money and not delivering a product.
Yeah, to me, it's a very hard sell to tell someone, hey, you should give us a few $1 million, because what we want to do is take what we've done and implement it again, but we'll do it right this time, I swear.
We'll make it better.
We'll make it more better this time. Yeah, I think
more
that's
better-ish.
Yeah, that's kind of tough. So
well, and anytime you're dealing with existing code, refactoring it without actually rewriting it is like super hard.
Yeah, definitely.
You get to a point where you just say, screw it, we're gonna rewrite it.
Refactoring it is hard too sometimes.
Refactoring, yeah, I think refactoring is hard a lot of the times.
Yeah, well, yeah, especially depending on how old and
crufty,
how heavily hacked the system is. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so I think there's trade-offs either way, but the original question, like, what's a good mix? Like, to me, it's like 1 to 5 max, senior to junior. Once you mix in mid-levels and leads, I mean, obviously you shouldn't be too architect heavy. That's something that came up in the chat room too, is the word architect. And
oh yeah, it has some connotations, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can't be too heavy on the senior to senior lead people, or at least in my opinion, because if you are, you end up with, especially if you have a large number of juniors, you end up with the ivory tower / ruler of the architecture situation. Yes. Or pattern where it's, I've decided that this is how the systems will all integrate together. Now all of you minions will implement it.
Right.
And that does not work.
No, it's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it works for a while, but you're going to have a high turnover rate. I can almost guarantee that.
Yeah. Yeah,
because no one's going to grow.
You shouldn't hire an architect unless it's Art Vandelay.
Isn't he a latex salesman?
And an importer-exporter.
Yeah.
He does it all.
We might be mixing up our Seinfeld trivia here. I'm not sure. It's been a while. All right. Yeah, so, do you have anything? Do you have any other points or questions that you think?
Yeah, I mean.
Now?
Again, I think I agree with you. I think I kind of look at it almost like building a baseball team. I mean, I'm getting into sports ball here for a second, so if you're not a sports ball fan, you can tune out for the next minute or two. But a lot of good baseball teams, they bring in these young, inexperienced players, right, and they train them by having them play in the minor leagues, right, and then once they've gained the experience that they need playing professional baseball, they strengthen their team by bringing these people through the farm system.
Mm-hmm.
which is essentially what you're doing with your junior. When you have a kind of a 5-to-1 split or a 5-to-2 split or whatever, right? You're hoping, right? And just like in baseball, not every prospect that you think that's going to make it to the major leagues does.
Yeah.
But you're hoping if you can get one or two of those junior devs to be eventually become, A, to stick around long enough, and B, to eventually become seniors, and they've been kind of working around and with good seniors to start with.
Hopefully they're good seniors, right?
What's that?
Hopefully they're good seniors.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
hired them.
Well, yeah, just making a point. Right, but yeah, you're kind of building your team from within. People talk about
Yeah.
promoting people from within instead of going outside the organization to look. It's kind of that same thing. You want to have an environment where the people that are there that are inexperienced can become increasingly valuable to your organization.
Yeah.
Not just in the immediate, but in the future as well.
Yeah, and that's your point of the minor leagues or whatever is valid. Like I think that's kind of the reason the reason that I prefer the higher quality seniors first, because
Yes.
then you don't have to hire quality seniors later.
Right.
They've kind of taken it and trained and mentored the other people that you've hired to the level. So I think it's good for employee retention and for growth as a company where you're not having to bring in the outside people. I mean, obviously there's going to be turnover and there's going to be people that leave for various reasons, and that's fine. But I think setting yourself up from the standpoint of having people that can mentor first is going to be more beneficial, in my opinion, than just hiring a new seniors or whatever.
I agree.
Good.
Yeah.
You should agree.
I know. I always agree with you.
All right. Well, I actually don't have anything else on this particular topic, and we don't have any.
Do we have any more IRC questions?
I don't think I missed any.
Someone asked me why I hate Bitbucket.
Yeah. Why do you hate Bitbucket?
I don't.
Okay. Cool. Well, there you go. That's the answer to that question. And then another question. Another question that came up from our good friend Chris Tankersley is if you're remote, or if you work at home, and you're not wearing pants, are you a senior or a lead developer? And he's actually tweeted about this, and I think our account has actually retweeted it already. But the answer to that question is if you are a remote employee and you're not wearing pants, you are a senior lead principal staff engineer developer snowflake who's an Ivory Tower Solutions architect. That is your official designation in the system that we won't talk about on Loosely Coupled.
The system that refuses to be named.
Yeah, the system formerly known as the Developer Cast System, created by Matt Frost. So if you have any questions, ping him on Twitter.
Okay, yes, it was.
Oh, all right. Okay, cool. Never mind. Don't ping him on Twitter about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, to be clear, I did not invent the cast system.
That's true.
I just applied the term.
Yeah, that's true. I called it the Developer Cast System.
I know, but
exactly the same.
I have a sneaking suspicion that the term cast system has some negative connotation.
Yes, I think it does.
So, apologies.
Yes, we're sorry. We didn't mean it in any offensive way. So
we meant cast system in a completely non-offensive way.
Yes, in terms of developers being seniors and leads and such. That's all we meant.
Right.
Yeah. So I think
we're preemptively apologizing.
So yeah. So I think we can call this one a wrap. That is.
Yeah. Did you want to read the summary?
Oh right, I forgot about that.
I think this one is completely centered around me.
I don't. Let me see. Where is it? I don't know. I'm missing it. Oh, here we go. Okay, so the summary for this episode is that Matt thinks we should have a cast system for developers, with the unclean being beaten with extension cords, and he hates Bitbucket. So that is what we've learned from episode 10 of the Loosely Coupled podcast. Big thank you to everyone who's hanging out in the IRC channel right now.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Been very helpful. It's awesome to have a live audience. Thank you, Matt, and we will
Thank
see
you,
you
Jeff.
all next time for episode 11, which we don't know what it's going to be called yet. So definitely won't be called the cast system.
No, we're gonna abandon.
We're going to abandon that. All right,
term.
we're going to put that in with the ditch digging.
Yes,
All right.
it had a nice run, and it's now over.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for listening. Episode 10, Lucy Couple Podcast. See you next time.
Later.